What have we done, huh? We put fellas in leg irons. We killed each other. Invaded Cuba. And now we're about to invade the Philippines. And this is the land of freedom? It's ridiculous. This isn't a land for men. It's a land for money.
You enjoy being a rich man's toy, do you?
I enjoy society, flaws and all.
Red Dead Redemption's main antagonist, Edgar Ross, is a character who is the quintessential and unabashedly immoral, cruel, and corrupt law enforcement officer who will justify any means to successfully achieve the ends he's pursuing. Ross is steadfast in his devotion to serving the federal government, specifically enforcing its laws and achieving its aims. Ross is a cog in the machine, and he takes tremendous pride in the role he plays. His role as a law enforcement officer, specifically as an agent of the Bureau of Investigation, provides him with not only a purpose, but also, and more importantly, a taste of power, which enables him to enact his will over others in the name of maintaining order and preserving civilization. His profession also provides Ross with the possibilities for personal glory, which is an overwhelming motivation and personal desire. However, when it comes to civilization, Ross is not particularly interested in protecting and serving the normal citizens of the emerging American nation-state. Ross freely and openly admitted that he considers the rank and file, the common people and residents of Blackwater, to be scum. Make no mistake about it, Edgar Ross has no moral pretenses or justifications regarding the concept of to protect and serve. Edgar Ross is in it for the power and serving the very powerful. This is his purpose in life, and he is diligent in ensuring the will of the federal government and the American ruling class is maintained. Ross will abuse anyone and everyone around him. He is rude, ruthless, depraved, and shameless, while not possessing anything remotely close to something resembling a conscience. Edgar Ross is a relentless servant of the federal government, which ultimately does the bidding for the rich and powerful, and Ross is proud to serve their interests. In Ross's mind, both the powerful ruling class and its federal government are the key elements which enable and maintain civilization, or more specifically, the American nation-state and capitalism, and that the alternative is hell. And to maintain this civilization, Ross will go to any length to ensure that any and all criminal elements, gangs, outlaws, and the ways of the past are buried and long forgotten. That because there are dangerous criminals and outlaws which pose threats to the healthy functioning of civilization, specifically the nation-state and the economy, harsh and brutal means are justified in order to crush the criminal menace. As a senior agent for the Bureau of Investigation, Edgar Ross has both a purpose and power, which provides possibilities of rewards for personal glory. I believe that this profession subdues and buries Ross's deeply ingrained tendencies of self-loathing and low self-esteem. He's no longer a short, insignificant, and repulsive, lonesome creature, but instead serves a key purpose in maintaining American society. I believe that his role and resulting power permits Ross to take all of his self-loathing and personal frustrations out on others, those he envies or is jealous of, and those who he believes need to be served with his own particular brand of justice. Red Dead Redemption begins in 1911. Edgar Ross and other agents of the Bureau of Investigation have kidnapped Abigail Roberts and Jack Marston. John Marston has no choice and has to do Ross's bidding if he wants to see his family again. John has to track down and capture or kill former fellow members of the Vanderlyn gang, specifically Bill Williamson and Javier Escuela. Ross and junior agent Archer Fordham accompany John to the Blackwater train station and see him off on his dirty work for the corrupt federal law enforcement agents. The story has just begun, and right from the get-go, we are directly exposed to the sheer corruption, abuse of power, cowardice, and heinous lengths that Ross and other corrupt federal agents will go to in order to wipe out the remnants of the Vanderlyn gang. Shortly after arriving in New Austin by train from Blackwater in West Elizabeth, John's life is saved by Bonnie McFarlane, and he opens up and shares with her why he's in New Austin and pursuing Bill Williamson. His family has been kidnapped by federal agents, and if he wants to see them again, he has to capture or kill Williamson and Escuela. Nonetheless, the fact remains that the dangerous men he has to track down are not much different than those he's doing the dirty work for. John's pursuit of Williamson and Escuela eventually leads him into Mexico, where after an extensive and exhaustive search, he locates Javier. After Javier is either apprehended or killed by John, he meets Ross and Fordham at the Ramita de la Bahia Bridge, which connects the New Paradise state of Mexico to the state of New Austin in the US. Agent Fordham directs John to continue his pursuit of Bill, and once he's successful, he should then travel to Blackwater, as Fordham elaborates and informs John that the Bureau believes Dutch Vanderlyn is close by and hiding out within West Elizabeth. Despite this being only a very brief meeting, Ross takes the time to insult John, which will become a regular occurrence, by remarking that Abigail sends her regards before driving away with Javier. Despite the fact that John has dealt with both Javier Escuela and eventually Bill Williamson, Agent Ross demands more from John, and that Dutch Vanderlyn must be eliminated. So, with no choice and doing what he must to secure his family's safety and freedom, John continues to do the bidding of Edgar Ross and the corrupt elements of the Bureau of Investigation, by first saving an informant, Nastus, from Dutch's gang at the wreck of the Serendipity.
I ask you to calm down.
Why? Why? I did what you asked. I got you Williamson and Escuela. It's over. Stop playing games with me.
No one's playing games with you, Mr. Marston. But if we were to play some games, there'd be some interesting ones we could play.
Thanks, sir.
In the mission Bear One Another's Burdens, Ross pretty much spends the entire time insulting and belittling John. I believe that Ross has a superiority complex due to his deeply ingrained self-loathing and projects all of his insecurities and vitriol onto John. This is in order to elevate and make himself feel better, and Ross will constantly do this and remind John just how superior he thinks he is.
Like hanging you for murder, or confiscating all your property, like that little farm of yours, or having you put in an electric chair. Those are the sort of games we could play.
Throughout this mission, Ross makes absurd claims about John and his past. The impression he leaves is one embellishing the past, plus the pursuits and ventures of the Vanderlyn gang, in order to make John into some sort of monster. Therefore, Ross can feel justified in his actions and superior to John. Ross is also completely full of it. If John had received a death sentence, he would have already been arrested and prosecuted in a court of law, but nothing of the sort has transpired, and Ross is simply making things up.
But we choose to play a different game, so calm down and play along with us.
So calm down and play along with us. Ross is basically saying to John that you must do what I want you to do, so I can receive all of the glory.
Where's my wife?
You know, I forget, but I hear it's very nice this time of year. Mr. Marston, please, I've never insulted your meager intelligence.
Never insulted your meager intelligence? Not only has Ross been insulting John non-stop, but did so by describing John's intelligence as meager. In fact, John has proven himself to be very quick on his feet and quite capable in all sorts of different situations throughout the story. Quite more so than Ross, who leads from behind and takes the credit of others.
Do not insult mine. We've done this little deal for your freedom in exchange for all your men from your old gang. You gave us Williamson and Escuela. We still don't have Vanderlyn, but now we know where he is.
Then go and shoot him.
No, sir. I want you to shoot him for me.
Ross is both a coward and lazy. He lacks the backbone to face off against Dutch's gang without John, and he wants John to do all of the proverbial heavy lifting, or rather the dirty work, so Ross can ultimately take the credit for himself.
And then I'll let you be. The last thing I want to do is make martyrs out of all these people.
It's quite interesting that Ross says, "The last thing I want to do is make martyrs out of all of these people," when in the end, he made a martyr of John.
He could be killed by some petty squab or by another lowlife.
We believe Vanderlyn is holed up with a group of renegades near the wreck of the Serendipity riverboat.
Yes. Another group of renegades. Obviously, the first group, your group, has, shall we say, been disbanded?
Disbanded.
Anyway, Mr. Ford and Mr. Marston, shall we go? Oh, Mr. Marston, your wife and son are doing well. Let's both try to ensure things stay that way.
Ross is so spiteful and insufferable that he takes advantage of every opportunity to twist the knife by insulting or threatening John, or in this case, threatening the lives of Abigail and Jack. Only a spineless coward like Ross would threaten the lives of an innocent woman and child.
To you, sir.
Isn't this something? Lawmakers and lawbreakers working together for the good of civilization.
Like you always say, sir, the higher the stakes, the smarter you have to play the game.
I can't imagine I ever said anything quite so trite.
Edgar Ross is such a miserable, spiteful, and power-hungry curmudgeon that he also openly condescends and insults Agent Fordham. Ross is so miserable that he does his best to make things miserable for everyone else around him.
In any case, I'm not sure Mr. Marston would agree with us.
Unfortunately, Mr. Marston isn't broad-minded enough to appreciate the unique opportunity we're offering him.
Son of a whore.
You best watch your damn mouth!
And it's strange you should say that, Mr. Marston, because according to my files, you are the whore's son. Now, what else can I recall from the files? Oh, let's see. You killed hundreds of innocent people.
I'm sorry, but I believe this is either bad writing on behalf of Rockstar's outstanding team of writers, or a complete and ridiculous exaggeration by Ross. John Marston has not killed hundreds of innocent people. John isn't serving multiple tours of duty in the front lines of an endless and horrific war. Nor is John flying a bomber which is bombing civilians in major cities and urban centers in a prolonged war. Wild West outlaws were simply incapable of killing hundreds of innocent people, and the Vanderlyn gang didn't intentionally target and kill hundreds of innocent civilians. Regardless, if this is Ross exaggerating, again, he is trying to make John into a monster.
You robbed at least 40 banks that we're aware of.
They told us there was a prize when you got to 50.
Once again, I believe this is not accurate, as there's no way the Vanderlyn gang would be capable, despite being active for 2 decades, of robbing 40 banks and evading capture and prosecution.
I'm glad this is all such a joke to you.
I want my family.
And I'm sure all the men you murdered wanted their families too.
Just who did John murder? Much of the time, the Vanderlyn gang were fighting off rival gangs, like the O'Driscolls.
Come now, you're stupid, but you're not that stupid.
No, Agent Ross, you're pretty stupid. Your plan to send 2 men, John and Agent Fordham, into the wreck of the Serendipity to take on Dutch's gang and capture Dutch is a horrible plan.
We both know how this has to be. And it could be all over today. As soon as we find Dutch Vanderlyn, you can go back home and play being a farmer again, or whatever else you've been pretending to do for the last few years.
Due to what I believe is his superiority complex and self-loathing, Ross can't help himself and denigrates everything to do with John. John left the Vanderlyn gang over a decade ago and the outlaw life. But Ross can't let that go and belittles John as a farmer and family man. I believe it's quite clear that Ross is envious and jealous of John. John is younger, taller, has a family, and is better looking than Ross, and Ross can't let that go. That John was once an outlaw and therefore wants to make himself feel better by making John suffer.
First it was Bill, now it's Dutch. After Dutch, it'll be somebody else. Where does it end?
It ends when we say it ends. You're in no position to make demands.
Actually, John is in a position to make demands. To make demands for a lawyer, and for specific federal agents to be investigated, arrested, and prosecuted for kidnapping Abigail Roberts and Jack Marston, 2 innocent civilians.
Like you live. You don't just walk away from that. Buy a few chickens and make it all disappear. You should be dead or rotting in a jail cell by now. We are giving you a chance at new life.
This admission from Ross is important to understanding his mentality. According to Ross's logic, as a senior federal agent, only he has the ability to absolve John of his past life. Ross simply cannot accept that John chose to leave the outlaw life a long time ago and became a law-abiding civilian and family man. Not only is Ross jealous of John, but Ross believes that he is superior to John and therefore has power over John and can therefore control John's life and destiny. Ross really does have a warped and twisted mind.
It's not far now. The old Serendipity wreck has been used as an occasional criminal hideout for years. We were informed that Vanderlyn and his gang are making camp there. We'll stop on the cliff above, and you and Agent Fordham will go on foot. I'll stay with the vehicle and keep watch.
It really is amazing just how much of a gutless and shameless coward Edgar Ross really is, as he loves to lead from behind. Of course, Ross orders John and Agent Fordham to proceed into the wreck of the Serendipity, while Agent Ross waits with the car. John locates the informant, Nastus, but it's a trap and members of Dutch's gang were waiting. Nastus is hurt and can't walk, so John has to carry him, while he and Agent Fordham shoot their way out of the wreck of the Serendipity, taking out many members of Dutch's gang, and eventually make it back to the car.
Christ alive! What the hell happened down there?
It was a trap. They were waiting for us.
And who is this savage? A prisoner?
This is the informant, sir.
Do you speak English?
Yes he does, sir. He's the informant, Gnostus.
Don't get snarky with me, Fordham.
Edgar Ross walked into that one all by himself. As usual, Ross is belligerent and flying off the handle. He's brimming with anger and impatience. He's overly presumptuous and clearly racist, assuming that Gnostus cannot speak English, despite the fact that Gnostus is indeed the informant for the Bureau of Investigation. And with Agent Fordham's mere observation regarding Gnostus, the fact that he's their informant made Ross look like such a belligerent buffoon.
We found him tied up on the boat, then they jumped us.
Nice of you to help us out. Hell of a plan sending in 2 men to take on an entire gang of outlaws, especially when one of them's an office clerk, or social secretary or some such.
You shut your mouth!
And for the first time, Ross is speechless and has nothing to say. No quick insults or denigrating or condescending remarks for John, because Ross is the senior agent and his plan was lazy and a joke. Ross is not only a coward, but also clearly incompetent.
Come on, not now!
What's wrong?
I don't know. The motor just gave out.
Well, fix it, you fool! We need to get this man to a doctor!
Of course, sir.
So it's not only Agent Fordham's fault the engine is having difficulty, but he's also a fool, and apparently an auto mechanic as well.
It's Dutch's men.
Marston, we'll hold them off. Fordham, we'll fix that damn engine!
Now, even though Ross said he and John would fight off Dutch's men while Fordham fixes the car's engine, it's John who fights off the gang members, as Ross just sort of cowers behind John.
I can't see any more of them. Fordham, are we ready?
Yes, sir, I think so.
Come on, let's get back to Blackwater.
You make me blush with all these kind words. So much for this automobile of yours. If this is the future, God help us all.
It's not the automobile. A bad workman shouldn't blame his tools. Perhaps if Mr. Fordham maneuvered it with a little more finesse.
I was trying to escape an ambush, sir.
Even if it was running fine, they'd still have caught us. I can walk faster than this piece of crap.
Ross is such a buffoon, and both Fordham and John are correct. Even if the car didn't experience engine problems, Dutch's men would have caught up to them, and this is too close for comfort for a coward like Edgar Ross. Therefore, he takes out all of his frustrations on Fordham.
Give me a horse any day. So what now? Do I get to see my family?
Where is Dutch Vanderlyn?
I don't know.
In that case, oh boy, no, you don't get to see your family. It's a fairly simple agreement, Mr. Marston.
No, it's not an agreement. It's kidnapping and abuse of power.
Even for a man as devoid of intellect as yourself. If you'd like me to explain it to you again, I'd be more than willing.
No, you've said enough.
We'll find Vanderlyn soon enough. For now, however, I suggest we call it a day.
So how does it feel, taking a man's wife and child from him? Does it make you feel good?
How does it feel to kill hundreds of men in cold blood?
You're a coward.
You're a murderer. Actions have consequences, Mr. Marston.
Actions do indeed have consequences, as Ross is in for a rude awakening at the end of the story. Regardless, John calls out Ross for what he is, a coward. a coward who abuses his power and position and kidnapped an innocent woman and child. John also asks Ross if it makes him feel good, and John is spot on here in terms of Ross's insecurities. Ross, of course, accuses John once more of the ridiculous claim that he's murdered hundreds of innocent people. Again, Ross's superiority complex is kicking in, so he can feel better about himself. John, Fordham, and Ross finally make it back to Blackwater and arrive at Harold McDougal's office, a Yale anthropologist who's been assisting the Bureau of Investigation with Native Americans in West Elizabeth, and drop off Nastus so he can recover from his ordeal.
What a pleasant surprise, Mr. Marston. An informant just told us some interesting news. Our mutual friend, Mr. Vanderlyn, is about to pay call on his bank manager. What do you say to having a little financial discussion with the fellow?
In the mission, great men are not always wise. John, Ross, Fordham, and other law enforcement personnel intervene in the attempted robbery of the First National Bank of Blackwater by Dutch's gang. Ross, of course, once more leads from behind, and instead of taking a strategic position close to the bank, for example along both sides of the building, Ross opts to have everyone far across from the bank on a rooftop. In fact, the rooftop they climb on top of is the Bureau of Investigation's office in Blackwater. Ross again is both a coward and clearly lazy. After sniping several of Dutch's gang members around the entrance to the bank, Ross orders John and two other men to storm the bank and get Dutch. Ross is not only again leading from behind, but also implementing the same dumb plan in which a small number of outnumbered men must infiltrate a location and take out a much superior number of gang members. Nonetheless, John and the other two men storm the bank and take out more of Dutch's gang members and locate him in a second-floor office in which he's holding a bank employee hostage. John tries to talk Dutch out of the situation, but Dutch brutally murders the woman in cold blood and is just barely able to escape from the bank and Blackwater, fleeing to Bear Claw Camp in the Tall Trees region. John and the other two men meet up with Ross, Fordham, and other federal agents, and they ride to Bear Claw Camp. Ross, of course, can't help himself and once more has to feel superior to John and begins denigrating him, characterizing Dutch as some sort of mentor for John. John, however, cleverly throws it right back into Ross's face and points out that Ross and Dutch have much more in common, drawing further ire from Ross, who is truly odious and toxic.
So that's the great Dutch? What a role model! The man who made you who you are.
I guess so.
Has he changed?
No, still the same crazy bastard he turned into.
How was it seeing him after all this time? Did he tug on your heartstrings?
He kind of reminds me of you. A violent piece of shit who went and confused himself with God.
Isn't that sweet of you? And now you must kill him. Your side is chosen.
My side ain't chosen. My side was given. I'd kill you 100 times before I killed Dutch, if it was an option.
Hallelujah! I think we're finally reaching an understanding, Mr. Marston.
There's really no need for this kind of behavior, but Ross does his utmost to remain insufferable and spiteful in John's presence. Ross must feel superior to John, and the fact that this keeps recurring says everything you need to know about him. Upon finally arriving at Bear Claw Camp, John and the others take out more of Dutch's gang members. However, Dutch is nowhere to be found. After John informs Ross of Dutch's escape, Ross reveals part of his true motivations, which are narcissistic in nature. His desire for recognition, personal glory, and having his ego emboldened. And John is repulsed.
Where's Dutch, Marston?
He got away.
Scared to shoot him? Too much to handle?
When the opportunity presents itself, I'll put a bullet in him, don't you worry. Won't like myself for doing it, but I'll do it.
Ah, good man, good man. You know, at the end of this, you'll probably get a medal. I know I shall.
In the mission And You Will Know the Truth, John arrives at the Bureau of Investigation office and demands his family's freedom once more, but is met with threats and scorn from agents Fordham and Ross, with Ross further denigrating John and continuing with his narrative that John still admires Dutch. Ross then compares Dutch to a nature writer in a pretentious and contrived monologue. Ross then openly admits that as agents of the state who enforce the laws of the state and of the ruling class, that John is an insignificant creature clinging to life just like the rest of the scum in this town, and that they are the bad guys who maintain society, and according to them, there is no alternative. When Ross is finally finished, John calls them out as kidnappers operating above the law, and to this Ross really can't say much.
You're an insignificant creature desperately clinging on to life like the rest of the scum in this town. You see, me and Archer, we're the bad guys. We enforce the rules. Now, while the rules may not be perfect, they're really not so bad.
Exactly. What's the alternative?
Yeah. See, I'll tell you what the alternative is. It's not complicated. It's about one man and his gun versus another man. Sure, civilization may be dull, but the alternative, Mr. Marston, is hell.
And the way you enforce this civilization, this freedom for men to like or not like flowers, or whatever in God's name you were just talking about, is to kidnap a man's wife and son?
Well, I know there's contradictions. I'm not gonna lie to you. Yeah, as I said, I'm not a great intellect.
Ross's brutally honest admission regarding the common residents of Blackwater speaks directly to the heart of their roles as federal agents. They enforce the laws of the state which benefit moneyed interests, or rather those of the rich and powerful, as opposed to the common citizens who are scum. It's not a nation of laws for people, but rather for money and rich and powerful interests. In Red Dead Redemption 2, both Uncle and Arthur Morgan recognize this, with Uncle relating this reality to those around the campfire one night, while Arthur Morgan spoke truth to power in his own encounter with Edgar Ross and Andrew Milton, when these two men were then serving as agents of the Pinkerton Detective Agency in 1899.
What have we done, huh? We put fellas in leg irons. We killed each other. Invaded Cuba. And now we're about to invade the Philippines. And this is the land of freedom? It's ridiculous. This isn't a land for men. It's a land for money.
We want Vanderlyn.
Oh, Dutch. I haven't seen him for months.
That's so. Because I heard a guy fitting his description robbed a train belonging to Leviticus Cornwall up near Granite Pass.
Oh, ain't that a little old-fashioned nowadays?
Apparently not. Listen. This is my offer, Mr. Morgan. Bring in Vanderlyn. You have my word you won't swing.
Oh, I ain't gonna swing anyways, Agent
Milton.
You see, I haven't done anything wrong, aside from not play the games to your rules.
Spare me the philosophy lesson. I've already heard it from Mac Callender.
Mac Callender?
He was pretty shot up by the time I got to him. So really, it was more of a mercy killing. Slow, but merciful.
You enjoy being a rich man's toy, dear?
I enjoy society, flaws and all.
Agent Ross has somehow enlisted the assistance of the US Army, which I think is illegal, in his pursuit of Dutch and has set a trap in the Great Plains with a small army camp featuring ammo and supplies, in order to lure Dutch's gang in, as they require constant necessities. Ross has also arranged for himself, Fordham, and John to use an armored vehicle for the trap. They eventually clash with many members of Dutch's gang and stave off a persistent assault featuring dynamite and explosives. After the armored vehicle is incapacitated by an explosive, they continue on horseback to Dutch's camp at Kokanee, as Ross fears Dutch may flee and escape. Upon arriving at Kokanee, the gate is destroyed and John leads the assault. The members of Dutch's gang are taken out by John and the accompanying soldiers. John continues to press forward, getting deeper into the gang's camp until he eventually traps and confronts Dutch on a mountain ledge. With nowhere left to run and hide, Dutch tells John that his time and the time of outlaws is over, and that law enforcement will look for another monster to hunt down and therefore justify their wages. Dutch then commits suicide by backing off the cliff's ledge. Ross finally shows up with Fordham when John reaches the bottom of the mountain ledge where Dutch fell. Ross ridicules John's results, preferring that John shot him instead. So he takes John's pistol and shoots Dutch's corpse, commenting that it looks better in the report that way. Fordham, meanwhile, is actually very professional, respectful, and thankful for John's efforts and results.
Thank you, Mr. Marston, for everything. I know this wasn't easy for you, but I have to say, you've done your country proud.
But Ross initially tells John that Abigail was killed in a prison riot, and John pulls out his gun and aims it at Ross. But Ross elaborates that it was only a joke, and that he has finally set Abigail and Jack free, informing John that they're waiting for him at his ranch at Beecher's Hope. John returns to his home and is finally reunited with his family, and for a decent period of time, he resumes his peaceful life with his family. However, Ross breaks his agreement with John when he shows up at Beecher's Hope one morning with a large group of soldiers and US Marshals. Nonetheless, John is able to fight off several waves of soldiers and marshals, but Uncle is shot and dies from his wound. John defends his family valiantly from the corrupt and homicidal marshals and soldiers. Retreating to the ranch's barn, John ensures the escape of Abigail and Jack by setting them off through the rear entrance on horseback. Now alone in the barn, John finds himself surrounded but not deterred. With his family's safety ensured, John, who doesn't fear death, accepts his fate and sacrifices himself for his family. John exits the barn to confront more of the corrupt and homicidal soldiers and marshals, but is simply outgunned and is shot to death. Ross, repulsive and vulgar until the very end, lights a cigar as he watches John fall to the ground and die. Ross and the rest then leave Beecher's Hope, with Jack and Abigail returning soon afterwards, and finding John murdered in cold blood. Edgar Ross's horrendous and repulsive behavior reflects just how ugly a person he really is. Miserable, rude, petty, vindictive, hypocritical, and odious. I believe Ross is the kind of person who has looked in the mirror his entire life and has never liked what he's seen, so he takes out all of his anger, angst, insecurities, and frustrations on anyone or even everyone around him. These frustrations, combined with the trappings of power in his role as a federal agent, have contributed significantly to Ross's superiority complex. He has generally felt inferior and hated himself throughout much of his life, but his position as a senior federal agent has granted Ross power and influence, which he yields mercilessly. Ross takes out all of his frustrations on others while significantly abusing his power and authority, all the while receiving the praises of his colleagues, the press, and therefore bearing his insecurities and frustrations for a time, until they eventually resurface, while satisfying his cravings for personal glory. For Ross, the ends justify the means. The final remnants of the Vanderlyn gang have been eliminated and cleansed from the earth, and Ross receives all of the praise and glory. Despite leading from the absolute rear and proverbial shadows while twisting John's arm, committing horrendous crimes while insulting nearly everyone in sight. Edgar Ross finally retired from the Blackwater branch of the Bureau of Investigation in 1914 and moved with his wife Emily to a small cabin at Lake Don Julio in Cholla Springs, New Austin. Meanwhile, Jack Marston was now 19 years old and alone. His mother Abigail died of unknown causes, and after paying a visit to the graves of his father, mother, and uncle at Beecher's Hope, he set off on a mission to avenge the murder of his father. Jack first travels to Blackwater and locates Howard Sawicki, a young agent of the Bureau of Investigation, at the train station. He asks Sawicki about Edgar Ross and is informed that Ross retired with his wife to a cabin at Lake Don Julio in New Austin. Jack then makes the journey to the middle of New Austin and finds Emily Ross at a cabin at Lake Don Julio in Cholla Springs. Jack tells Emily that he has a letter for Edgar Ross, but Emily tells Jack that he left on a hunting trip with his brother, Philip Ross, and he is actually in Mexico. Jack crosses the border into Mexico and locates Philip Ross resting at Rio del Toro. Philip tells Jack that Edgar is hunting ducks alone further west down the river's shoreline, and that he also has a temper. This is interesting because it really does seem like even Edgar's own brother doesn't want to be around him, and even warns Jack of his temper. Jack thanks Philip for his assistance and continues on. Jack is finally on the verge of confronting the man who tormented his family and murdered his father. I just wish that Jack had said this to Ross in their confrontation. Jack tells Ross that he killed his father, when Jack should have been telling Ross that he tormented his family and murdered his father.
Excuse me, you Edgar Ross?
Do I know you?
Forgive me for startling you, sir. I have a message for you. My name is Jack Marston. You knew my father.
I see. I remember your father.
I've come for you, Ross.
You, boy, have sure shit found.
You killed my father.
Your father killed himself with the life he lived.
You killed him. I saw you.
You keep saying that.
You sent him to do your dirty work. Then you shot him like a dog.
And I'll shoot you like one too, you little piece of trash. Now get out of here before I kill you as well!
I ain't going nowhere, old man.
Enjoy your fishing, kid, while you still can.